Every insight deserves an audience. Welcome to Atypica AI. You know what's happening right now across Europe? Entire villages are dying. Not from war, not from natural disasters, but from something far quieter and more devastating. They're simply emptying out. I'm talking about thousands of rural communities where the last residents are literally turning off the lights and walking away, leaving behind centuries of culture, tradition, and irreplaceable heritage. But here's what most people don't understand. This isn't just a European problem waiting to happen elsewhere. This is a preview of what's coming to rural areas worldwide as urbanization accelerates. And more importantly, I've discovered that the communities fighting back and winning aren't doing what you'd expect. They're not just preserving old buildings or chasing tourists. They're completely reimagining what cultural preservation means in the 21st century. After investigating dozens of these ghost villages and interviewing everyone from EU policymakers to local mayors to private investors, I've uncovered 3 specific strategies that actually work and one massive mistake that almost everyone is making. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly why most preservation efforts fail and what you need to know if your community is facing similar challenges. Let me start with what we're really dealing with. Picture this. You're driving through rural Spain, Czech Republic, or Portugal, and you come across what looks like a movie set. Beautiful stone houses with red tile roofs, a centuries-old church at the center, maybe even a small plaza. But look closer. The windows are boarded up, weeds grow through the cobblestones, and the only sound is wind rustling through abandoned buildings. This is what locals call the slow, creeping sickness that's hollowing out rural Europe. The numbers are staggering. We're not talking about a few isolated cases. This is happening to thousands of communities simultaneously. Young people migrate to cities for education and jobs. Older residents age in place until they can no longer maintain their homes. And gradually, the social fabric that held these places together for generations simply unravels. But here's what I discovered that changed everything. The communities that are successfully fighting back aren't just trying to preserve the past. They're creating something entirely new while honoring what came before. And they're doing it through 3 specific models that work in combination, not in isolation. The first model is what heritage experts call community-first preservation. This isn't about outside experts or government officials deciding what's worth saving. It's about empowering the people who actually live there to define their own cultural identity and future. I interviewed Marco, a community leader in rural Italy, who told me something profound. We're not museums, we're not theme parks, we're living communities with roots that go deep. The moment you try to preserve us like artifacts, you kill what makes us special. This approach starts with a simple but revolutionary idea. The community itself must drive the vision, not tourists, not even well-meaning government officials. The residents who have kept these traditions alive for generations are the only ones who can authentically define what preservation means. But, and this is crucial, community passion alone isn't enough. Most grassroots preservation efforts fail because they can't generate the resources needed for large-scale restoration and economic sustainability. That's where the second model comes in. The integrated economic model recognizes that cultural preservation can't happen in an economic vacuum. Take Tarbina in Spain, which has become the gold standard for rural revitalization. Instead of choosing between heritage tourism or modern economic development, they created a strategy that combines heritage-based tourism, revitalized small-scale agriculture, and remote working hubs for digital professionals. Here's why this works. It creates multiple revenue streams that aren't dependent on external forces. If tourism drops, the remote workers and local agriculture continue. If agricultural markets shift, tourism and digital services provide stability. This diversified approach has attracted young families back to the village while maintaining its authentic character. You might think this sounds complicated, but the principle is simple. Give people multiple reasons to live and work in your community, not just visit it. The most successful villages I studied all had this in common. They became better places to visit. The third model addresses the biggest financial barrier, large-scale restoration of historic buildings. Here's the reality. Community groups and local governments rarely have the millions needed to restore a crumbling medieval castle or convert an abandoned monastery. This is where strategic public-private partnerships become essential. But here's what most people get wrong about private investment in heritage projects. They assume investors only care about profit and will inevitably destroy authenticity. My research shows this isn't true if you structure the partnership correctly. I interviewed Leo, a heritage-focused investor who's restored multiple historic properties across Europe. He told me, "I make money by preserving authenticity, not destroying it. Travelers today can spot fake heritage from miles away. The real value is in the genuine story and craftsmanship." The key is finding investors who understand that authenticity is the asset, not something that gets in the way of profit. These partnerships work when local government creates what Leo calls a concierge service, streamlined permitting, clear incentives, and a shared vision that puts cultural integrity first. Now, you're probably thinking this all sounds great in theory, but what about the risks? Because there are real dangers here that most communities don't see coming. The biggest risk isn't economic failure, it's success without authenticity. I call this the Disneyland trap. A village becomes so focused on attracting visitors and investment that it transforms into a sanitized, commercialized version of itself. The buildings get restored, but the soul gets lost. I've seen this happen when communities skip the first step, empowering local residents to define their own identity. When preservation becomes about external expectations rather than internal values, you end up with what one community member called a beautiful, empty barrel. It looks good, but it doesn't hold any wine. The second major risk is gentrification disguised as preservation. Successful revitalization drives up property values, and ironically, the very people whose culture you're trying to preserve get priced out of their own community. I interviewed Helena, a lifelong resident of a Portuguese village undergoing restoration, who said, "We're happy people want to save our village, but what good is it if we can't afford to live here anymore?" The communities that avoid this trap implement what I call community protection mechanisms from day one. This includes community land trusts, cooperative housing models, and policies that ensure local residents retain ownership and decision-making power even as property values rise. But here's what I want you to understand. These risks are completely manageable if you know what to look for and plan accordingly. The communities that fail are the ones that rush into preservation without thinking through the human dynamics. Based on my research, here's exactly what works. Start with the community, not the business plan, not the marketing strategy, the people. Create formal structures that give longtime residents real power in decision-making. Document both the physical heritage and the intangible culture, the stories, traditions, and knowledge that make a place unique. Then, build your integrated economic model around those authentic cultural assets. Don't try to compete with major tourist destinations by being louder or flashier. Compete by being more genuine, more connected to place, more meaningful. Finally, when you're ready for larger investments, choose partners who understand that authenticity is the business model, not an obstacle to it. Structure legal agreements that protect cultural integrity as rigorously as they protect financial returns. You know what convinced me this approach works? It's not just the success stories, it's the failures I studied. Every failed preservation effort I investigated had the same pattern. They prioritized buildings over people, or economics over culture, or outside investment over community empowerment. The successful projects don't make these trade-offs. They've learned that preservation isn't about choosing between past and future, it's about creating a future that honors the past while serving present needs. If you're involved with a rural community facing demographic decline, here's what you should do immediately. Start documenting everything. Not just the historic buildings, but the stories, the traditions, the knowledge held by older residents. Create opportunities for intergenerational exchange. And most importantly, ask your community this question: what do we want to preserve, and why do we want to preserve it? Because here's the truth I discovered. The communities that successfully preserve their heritage aren't trying to stop time. They're trying to ensure that the future includes the best of what they've built over centuries. That's not preservation, that's evolution guided by wisdom. The ghost villages that remain ghosts are the ones that gave up on having a future. The ones that are coming back to life are the ones that refuse to choose between honoring their past and building their future. And that choice is available to every community willing to make it.
Want to learn more about interesting research?
Check out
Atypica AI.